chives are a part of the allium family. That includes onion and garlic as well. They are fabulously fragrant and one of the few herbs where we really love the flowers as much as the green part, which in this case is the top of the delicate stem. They also bloom early in the spring. That means June in Vermont. There are two varieties that are common here: purple chives and garlic chives. Garlic chives have a white flower, and you guessed it, they kinda smell garlicky. They also bloom a bit later than purple chives. So this is what thyme looks like. You can see here that it's flowering. And this is variegated thyme. There's a few different kinds of thyme, and here we have oregano. It looks fairly similar to thyme, but you can see the leaves are a little different. Oregano has a square stem, as all the members of the mint family do. And here's some lovely lavender that you might know by its beautiful flowers, and of course, its noticeable smell. Not all lavenders are hardy in Vermont, but you definitely get lavenders that are cold hardy. Munstead lavender is an example of a variety that will tolerate our cold winters just fine. And here's some flatleaf parsley. There's two main varieties of parsley. We have Italian flatleaf and curly. The flatleaf variety tends to be somewhat more flavorful, and so it's used more in cooking, and the curly parsley is used more as a garnish. Here's some lovely rosemary. You'll notice the needle-like leaves. This is because it is originally from a dry, hilly climate, such as Greece and Italy. Rosemary doesn't overwinter here in Vermont, so it has to be potted up and brought in the fall, if you want to save it to live another season.
Featuring spring herbs isn't just about making your foods taste good, although of course it does. These herbs pack a nutritional punch that you might not realize from their small sizes. Rosemary. Well, the medicinal uses of rosemary have been touted for centuries. Rosemary is high in manganese, which helps with our metabolism and with blood clotting. Rosemary also contains a phytonutrient called carnosic acid. That's a powerful antioxidant that's been shown to slow the growth of cancer cells. Carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid both have powerful antibacterial, antiviral, and antifungal properties, so including lots of rosemary can potentially help lower the risk of infection. Chives are known for their allicin content. Allicin is a phytonutrient that has anti-inflammatory properties. They have a phytonutrient, for instance, called choline, which helps with mood, memory, and other brain and nervous system functions. Now, parsley rocks those vitamins even more than chives does. Just 2 tablespoons of parsley has 150% of the RDI for vitamin K. It has 16% of the RDI for vitamin C and 12% of the RDI for vitamin A. Parsley is also a good source of magnesium, potassium, folate, iron, and even calcium. So today we're going to be making some white bean soup with spring herbs. For this recipe, we're going to use cannellini beans. We're going to be using some fresh rosemary, some lemon juice, some flat Italian parsley, some chives, some olive oil, and some low-sodium vegetable broth. To get the beans for the soup that we're about to make, you can use dry beans that you've soaked and cooked. You can either soak them overnight, which we call a cold soak, or you can do something called a hot soak, where you bring the beans to a boil, then turn off the heat and let them soak in that very hot water for an hour. Both methods are equally good, and the hot soak is great for when you've forgotten to soak the beans the night before. Here we will be dumping the water out, and then we'll give the beans in the colander a pretty good rinse, move them around a bit so that they all get hit with some water. Oh, now we're ready to cook those beans. When adding water for cooking beans, do put in at a minimum 3 to 4 times the amount of water that you have in beans, as they do absorb a lot of water. Here the beans are starting to cook. Sometimes I will stir once or twice when they're first getting going, just to sort of make sure they're not sticking to the bottom of the pot. Once the beans start boiling, you can turn the heat down to a simmer and put the lid on the pot. When you first put the lid on, put it on a little askew so that the steam can escape and the water doesn't boil over and make a big mess. But once the water has simmered down to just little bubbles breaking on the top, then you can put the lid on completely. Peek in on them every once in a while to make sure that you're still getting the little blub 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 of the bubbles on the top. And then that's it. Chuck them in an hour. Here's our beans, all plump and done. When beans are done, they should be soft without being too mushy or falling apart. So always taste test them before you drain the water off. And if you find that they're a bit too hard, just cook them at a simmer for another 15 minutes or so and then check them again. And here we are draining the beans. There they go. And here they are. So whenever I cook veggies, I save the tail ends and the scraps of the veggies, but rather than putting them in the compost, I put them in a bag and I throw them in the freezer. And then when I want to make veggie stock, I just take them out of the freezer. I dump them in a pot like this one here. So here we've added more water, just put enough water to cover the frozen veggie ends, and then bring it to a boil and then simmer it for about 20 minutes and you're done and you've got beautiful veggie stock. Then you dump it all into a colander with a bowl or pot underneath, of course, to catch the broth. And here's our beautiful veggie broth with the veggies removed. And then you can compost those veggie ends now that they've given you all that they've got. So the next thing we're going to do is to prepare our fresh spring herbs. For our rosemary, we're just going to separate the stems and then we can just kind of pull them off like this. To mince the rosemary, we're going to kind of put it in a bunch and use a kind of rocker motion with the knife. And you can put one hand on this part of the knife to steady it. For the parsley, we're going to remove the leaves from the stem. And since we only need 1/4 cup, it's not a lot of picking. And then we're going to use that same rocker motion of the knife. The more fine the chop, the more flavor of that herb is going to be released. We're going to chop our chives the same way. And you can kind of feed things that are long and skinny like chives right into the blade. And this is going to be for the flavorful garnish on top of the soup. Okay, and there we have our 3 herbs all chopped up. Next step, we're going to combine half the beans into a saucepan. In they go. And then our homemade veggie broth, our rosemary, our parsley, and a bit of black pepper. And then we're going to blend this with a hand blender until it's pureed. If you don't have a hand blender like this one, you can use a masher like this one, an old-fashioned potato masher. You don't get quite the puree of the spices that you would with the hand blender, but that's okay because we mince them up pretty tiny anyway. With the hand blender, you'll probably want to tilt the pot to be sure that the hand blender is going to get completely submerged. If it's not completely submerged, it'll spit liquid all over the place. Okay, here we go. So you can see that you do get more of a puree with the hand blender, but the potato masher is fine too. Next, we're going to get our lemon juice ready by squeezing it. So this is an old-fashioned lemon juicer that you can get at any store that sells kitchen stuff. Or you can stick a fork into the lemon and twist it to get the lemon juice out, and that works well too. I'm going to take out a few of the seeds that I can see to start with, because lemon seeds are bitter if you bite into one. Next step, we're going to add our remaining beans and the water that the recipe calls for. And then we're going to transfer it to the stove and bring it to a boil. Our soup has come to a boil, and now we're going to add our lemon juice. We add lemon juice after the soup is heated and after it is boiled because lemon juice is very delicate and doesn't taste so lemony if you boil it. Okay, now we're going to ladle our soup. We'll stir it up from the bottom to make sure it's got plenty of whole beans in it and ladle it into a bowl. And then we're going to put some chives on it. We're going to drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil. So pretty. And there we have our lovely soup, just ready to be paired with some yummy whole grain crunchy bread, or some tortilla chips like we have here, or just straight up out of the bowl and just eaten right up.